G'day viewers and welcome back to another episode of AFL Fantasy Chats with Heff and Checkers. Round 15 has just concluded and I guess the race is somewhat heating up between the two of us, but I think you've pulled away again, Checkers.
Yeah, something I've gone up 2,000 ranks this week, so I don't know, I didn't see your rank. I saw your score and it was about 100 points lower than mine, so I didn't check in on the rank, so I checked it Sunday during the games. As I just finished, but rank 3,800 at the moment, scored 19.96 on the weekend. I checked and it was like 800 overall for the week, which shocked me a little bit because I was carrying guys like Bergman with his 50. Some people captain Luke Jackson, and if I jumped on that would have been even higher in the rankings. I had him in my team and could have VC loopholed him. So I was like, geez, I could have even been in the top couple hundred of scorers on the week, but just missed the boat.
Yeah, I had a look at your team. I think the main kind of difference between your team is you're not relying on Max Gawn like a lot of the other people who had the bye, and you had Jackson as well, and then you had the two gun rucks playing as well because Tim English is in amazing form at the moment, which has been an awesome pick by you. So I reckon that's kind of propelled you up, like you're scoring probably 140 more points there than everyone else on the back of that selection. So, that's why I think that's why you had the gap, but it's proven to be a good selection for you.
Yeah, to both the rucks. I think English scored high 130s and Jackson scored 144. So yeah, on a week where a lot of people would have had, I guess, gone out. I wonder if anyone else was out in the ruck world.
No, I think it was just gone out of the owned ones anyway.
Yeah, handy little week. It's a tough week coming up because a lot of my pod players have the bye. We got like guys like Tom Green's even considered a pod. I mean, he's only at like 10% ownership. Lockie Ash has been a bit of a pod. I've got Max Holmes, who's not even that highly selected. He's only in 30% of teams, whereas a lot of people, I would probably say highly selected is like 40 to 50%. So Josh Dunkley is a pod, so they're all at the bye this week and they're all on my side. So my bench is quite stacked with black dots. But I did prepare for this last week. I put a 890k in the bank. So we've got a few upgrades to do on the field, which will be handy. But yeah, it's going to be interesting because a lot of my primos are on the bench.
Yeah, that's the kind of, I was kind of avoiding this buy a little bit because I felt like there'd be a lot of players that I might have that would be on the buy this week. But like I've kind of left players like Levi Ashcroft in the side, so they've played up until this point. Kyle Lohman as well, and now I can kind of downgrade them and use that cash to try to get some other rookies up. But we'll go through my ranking for the week. Yeah, so I scored 1869, which I think was almost over 100 points more less than you, I reckon. What you cracked 2,000?
1996. So
yeah. Oh, so yeah, 130 odd points there. But it did bring my rank up. So I did go up about 500 spots to 6,769. So yeah, it probably goes to show that you probably should prepare for buys. I didn't really put much thought into it and thought I could just trade my way through it. But to be fair, like I've only dropped probably 1,000 spots during the buy, and looking at my team now, I've got a best 22 of starters, and then I've got enough money on the bench as well to make a few downgrades, get that kind of 6th or 8th premium depending on what line you're looking at, and use a few loopholes to increase your score towards the end of the season. So I'm not too upset with it, especially for someone who didn't probably put too much time into planning. I feel like I've got through it okay.
Still one more bye week to go, but yeah, we can. I guess next week we'd have a big recap of the bye weeks and what worked and what didn't. But yeah, it was a handy bye week, I guess. Going up 500 spots is still like a big win. That's a really good week. I didn't expect to go up all those ranks, and yeah, probably the rucks of the whole situation there. And I'll probably be going against the grain this week with all my primos on the bench, so it might slide down a few hundred. Hopefully not a few thousand this week.
I'll have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this week. We might get stuck into some of the picks for this week. Pods of the week. Who have you got? Now, we haven't discussed this, so hopefully we don't have the same one. But who's your pod of the week?
Yeah, I've got a couple from the Dogs that I don't know who to go with. Nick Caulfield played on the weekend, ex-St Kilda, high draft pick, 431,000. So not quite rookie, not quite mid-price. It's a weird sort of in-between area there. Only in 0.56% of teams, obviously just playing his first game for the season. Scored 74, had 10 marks. Looked like he could play alongside Bailey Dale across half-back, take a lot of cheap little marks and a few intercepts and stuff like that. But you've got Jason Johannesson playing in the VFL, and Jed Busling is sniffing around the VFL as well. So the debate here is, I've got Buslinger on the bench. Do I trade up to Caulfield, or do I hold tight and wait for Buslinger to come in? Because he's also averaging 96 in the VFL this year. He's had 6 games in a row of 25-plus disposals. Do you go with the youth? Do you take on Caulfield? What do you think is happening with the Dogs? I think there's points to be had there. There's definitely a point of difference player to be had. Puzzling is obviously a rookie, but if you run on Caulfield and he gets on a bit of a run, could average like 75 to 85, just the way the Dogs are playing.
Sorry, I missed that. Did you say Buslinger's on a chance to come in this week?
Well, his last 6 games have been 25-plus disposals.
Okay.
So
yeah, okay, that makes a good chance.
Yeah, and he had a good game last week in the VFL,
So they could be rotating between those 2 spots for Caulfield and Buslinger.
Johannesson, Caulfield, true. And Buslinger sort of fighting for a similar spot. But
yeah, true. He is risky, I think, when you put it like that. And I wouldn't have even thought of those situations. But yeah, I did see Johannesson did score a big ton. That was his first game back, I think, as well from injury. And they tend to like to bring him back in, and especially with Treloar out as well. Like they played Fraser in a few different spots on the weekend in defence and a little bit up forward. And I think he dropped out of the centre bounce attendances by 20-odd%, I think. So he'd likely go back in the midfield, which kind of leaves that halfback slot open. So it kind of gives Johannesson a bit of room to go straight in there. But then, yeah, I do like the point between Caulfield and Buslinger. I think they might experiment. And to be honest, like if they're making finals come the end of the season, like I probably see neither of them in their best 22 as well. So I do think that comes with a little bit of risk, but I'm a big Caulfield fan. Don't get me wrong. One of those seasons at St Kilda, I think 2020, I drafted him. It might have been 2019. But yeah, was a really serviceable player in one of my keeper league teams. So I do like the pick. But yeah, just a bit worried about that best 22, and I think the points you make are valid there.
It just reminds me of Johannesson's had some injury issues. Bevo loves those weird players. Like he picked up Tim O'Brien a few years ago and played him. He's picked up trying to think of the redhead that they picked up from Melbourne that plays on the wing sometimes.
Yeah, I know the guy you're talking about. Yeah.
Oscar Baker.
That's the one.
And they've got Lockie Bramble. So there's sort of like guys that Bevo knows can fill a role and do a job, and I think Caulfield's one of them. So maybe he gets a run of 5 or 6 games and could be a little coin spinner, but it's going to be hard because his score on the weekend's pretty handy. He might go up too much to be 500k next week, and you can't really afford to run a gamble on a 500k player. But
yeah, no, that's fair. It is a risky price point. Speaking of Lockie Bramble, I'm not sure if you saw my latest reel or TikTok. I lost my keeper league matchup by 1 point thanks to Lockie Bramble putting up a score of 94. So that guy is in the bad books this week. I think he's averaging around 60 odd. So yeah, no, it wasn't a good week for me. My pod of the week, mine's a bit more at the other end. I'm looking at Noah Anderson as my pod. I think he's definitely in under 10% of the teams. Had 133 points on the weekend. That was his biggest score of the year. So I don't like to get fooled by one-offs, like players that go big and quite often the next week. Like Josh Dunkley will be a classic example. I bet you the next game he'll go back to his old school ways. But I looked at Noah Anderson's last 5 games. He's gone over 115 in 4 of the last 5 games. So he's actually going okay at the moment. And then I'm looking at matchups as well. He's got Melbourne and Essendon as his next 2, which are just super easy, giving up heaps of points for inside midfielders there. He's already had his bye, so we don't have to worry about that coming up this week, obviously. Yeah, what do you think, Noah Anderson? Do you reckon he could be a premium option that not many people are thinking about?
I definitely think he's a premium option. He just goes a bit roller coastery sometimes. On the weekend, Jared Witts was up against Nick Madden, and then Madden even went off the ground late in the game. So first use was definitely gone to the Suns mids. I think I sent a message to our group chat saying it was Rao, Anderson, and Took Miller had 110 disposals between them on the weekend, which is like just rare for a trio of midfielders. So obviously that's not just like, he had a great week last week, but he has been doing some good weeks, probably the last 6 to 8, sort of like been on a bit of a run. But one thing I will say is when the Suns win, there was a stat where Anderson averaged like 10 to 15 points more. And when they lose, obviously has a bit of a stinker. So if they are stiffing around the 8 at the moment and even potentially get to lock themselves from the 8, hopefully, win a few games in the back run and really put the team on his shoulders. He's one of those types. So it reminds me of like a Connor Rosie, at Port Adelaide. When they win, he's really up and about, and he's carrying the team and dragging through the trenches. So, what are they sitting ninth at the moment? Going to have to win a few games on the run home, so probably a handy pick to have in that sense. When they win, I'm pretty sure it was like exactly 15 points more in a win. So.
Yeah, ninth at the moment, but got to remember they've got an extra game in hand, and it's going to be against Essendon. So it feels like that should be a win. I know it's at the end of the season. Essendon might get some players back, but really, like if you look at it that way, they probably should be sitting around the 5th mark at the moment. So it's probably a good sign that they could win a few games. I will flag that round 16 last year, which is 2 weeks after his bye, he had a big 140 last year and then had some easy matchups after that, but really tapered off after that. So, it might be a bit of a trap again. You got any more pods that you want to talk about, or do you want to move on to the hot takes?
I'll just say Butters, he only went up 6K on the weekend, but still put up a ton. We spoke about him last week. So he's still at his cheapest price, probably a pod as well. But Jack Ginnivan was one we spoke about in previous weeks, coming off the bye. 3.8% owned, averaging 70 for the year. From his last 5, he's averaging 80, so it's 10 points up on that. But if you take out his 38 in Tassie he had just before the bye, he was averaging 92. So 20 points up on what he's priced at. Has Northern St Kilda coming back from the bye, and I just think he's playing high up the ground lately. The Tassie score you probably put in the bin. He was still, if you look at his heat maps, he was probably in all the right places, but it was such a windy, cold night, and everyone scored really low that game, no matter who they were. So, it could be a sneaky little pod to keep an eye on. If he averages 20 points above what he's sort of priced at or where he's at. So not a lot of forward options, not a lot of premium forward options at the moment too. I think there's probably just a defined 7 primos that are there, and the rest you can't really pick apart. So if you want to pick a pod and chuck them in your 7, could be one for the back end of the year.
Yeah, I don't mind that. Selby from Moreira's Magic podcast always has the theory of the 7th primo that he likes to play. So he likes to pick one, like especially in the forward lines where there's not a lot of options. He'll pick an extra player to play on the bench, and he'll loophole one of them each week to try to get that advantage over the competition, which I don't think is a bad idea. Just looking at Port's run home for Butters, I'll just have a look here. Inside mids. He's got a pretty balanced run home. He's got Brisbane, Adelaide and Fremantle, which are the hard matchup for mids, but he's also got Carlton twice, West Coast and Gold Coast, which are the easy matchups in there, and then neutral games against Hawthorn and Geelong. So probably not the worst pick up there. Zach Butters is generally pretty safe as well. So it's a good little pod to have, I think, in your midfield. Anyways, what's your hot take for the week?
Hot take, this Swans-Bulldogs game is loom as a dangerous game. So we know that both teams can have dysfunctional forward lines at times. I mean, Sam Darcy's making Dogs' forward line look really good, but Norton can be one to sort of drop a lot of marks and just give the ball up, and their small forwards aren't really like A-class small forwards, but they're playing great footy at the moment. But Swans, you got Joel Amadi who just kicks behind after behind, and dysfunctional forward lines, great rebounding defence on both of them. So you got Bailey Dale, Matt Roberts, we're talking about Nick Caulfield or Jason Johannesson or Jed Buslinger, Nick Blakey. So there's a lot of like fantasy relevant rebound defenders, and I just worry this could either be the game where they all score 120 plus, or it could be a game where all these guys that are highly selected just score 60 to 80 because they cancel each other out. It's one of those games where when 2 good rebounding defensive teams play each other, sometimes the scores go great and sometimes they just don't get the footy at all.
No, I agree with that. I think looking at some of the matchups here as well, like a lot of people brought Darcy in last week, and people are saying like, Sydney's an easy matchup because they're, at the time they were a bottom 6 team type deal. Looking at the defense versus position here though, Sydney are the 4th hardest team for key forwards to score against this season. Sorry, no, that's over the last 5 weeks. Sorry. So even though they haven't been in the best form prior to last week, they still haven't been letting key forwards really get off the chain, and they did it again with Mitch Georgiadis on the weekend after a week where he kicked 7, So, yeah, some of the Dogs players like that, like a few extra factors like that might contribute to some lower scores for some of the more popular players as well. Just having a look at some of the general backs and rebounding backs though. But yeah, general backs are definitely good scorers against Sydney. And let's just see rebounding against Western Bulldogs. And yeah, rebounding defenders are good against Western Bulldogs as well. So like, your call there is on the money stat wise as well. So don't mind that.
Just worried there's a lot of highly selected players, people are banking on Bailey Dale, Matt Roberts, Blakey. Could even look at even if the midfield players like Richards and Kennedy sort of play their role a bit differently because of the Swans, and they have two gun midfields going against each other. Probably two of the best in form midfields at the moment going against each other. So sometimes it works a treat, but I do know from back in the day watching teams like Carlton play the Bulldogs. Some games you'd have all the guns score 140, but some games you'd have just the most random players like Lockie Bramble score well, and your Bonts and everyone would have an average game.
Yeah. I've got a good stat for you. Sydney on average are giving up 15 points above their average to wingers. So Sydney giving every winger that plays against Sydney is generally over the last 5 rounds has scored at least 15 points higher than their average. Who did you trade out last week that plays for the Dogs? Who plays on the wing?
Trade out?
Yeah. You told me you traded him out and you were devastated because he put up 108 last week.
Sam Davidson.
So I reckon Sam Davidson is going to go big again. So you might have traded him a week too early.
I know. And I was looking at it in a period where there's probably like Track being number 7 on the list of primo forwards, and maybe Vaughan Francis sniffing around. There's a lot of ifs and buts in who's a primo forward at the moment. Like you can be averaging 85 and be in the best 7. So if Sam Davidson just knocked out 106, he could be averaging over like the next 3 to 4 weeks 100 or 90, which would put him above Track, put him above Vaughan Francis, put him above Cozzy Pickett, and actually have him sitting like 3rd or 4th on the list of top 6 forwards.
Yeah.
And just trade him out thinking it's a rookie downgrade.
Yeah, because the matchups he's got, like especially last week, then this week as well, has actually a few nice matchups which could go again. So, but that's not my hot take. My hot take's a bit more left field than that. My hot take is Rory Laird is going to average 100 over the last 9 games. Here's the reasoning. So he's averaging 90 so far, which isn't bad. It's just not like the midfield standards he's been playing the last couple of years. But to finish off the season, this is how good his run is. So he's got Richmond, Melbourne, Western Bulldogs, Gold Coast. They're all considered like super easy matchups for rebounding defenders. He's got Port for a week. That's a hard matchup. But then goes Hawthorn, West Coast, which are both easy. Collingwood hard, and then he's got North, which are also considered very easy. So like if you were to look at Cow's scale of hardness type thing, you would have 7 of those green and 2 of them red, and none of them are really neutral matchups in there. Like they're all just easy.
The Port matchup probably also an orange, if anything. Like it's one where Rory Laird's played some good showdowns, and any player can sort of have a crazy good game. That I always find the traditional players have a great game in the showdown. Like if someone like a Boak who's maybe in and out of the side but been a stalwart. Riley O'Brien's been putting it on lately. Ollie Wines has had some very good showdowns lately. Players that everyone sort of thinks is maybe like a couple of years past it. I wouldn't be surprised if Brodie Smith sneaks in for the last showdown and has a great game. But, guys that really respect the rivalry and go in hard at the footy, someone like Rory Laird, that could easily be a green dot as well. So I would leave it with, 8-1. Yeah,
I think there's a few flags, though. He's been rested a couple of times, like subbed out just to kind of prepare, like in easy games to prepare him for hard games. Stuff like that. I think he got subbed out before the showdown, the last showdown. So just looking at the scale, it's an unbelievable run of green, especially you don't really see like a 4-week run, Richmond, Melbourne, Western Bulldogs, Gold Coast, that are traditionally easy matchups for rebounding defenders. You don't see that in a row very often. So it could just be like
any midfield minutes that he's been having are probably going to get squashed by Peatling coming back in and Matt Crouch in the next 2 weeks. So should just lock in on a halfback flank, which we know is probably better for his scoring at the moment as well. So,
I think it's better. Like the best scorers in the competition generally are halfback flankers these days. They're the ones that have the kind of big ceiling scores, I find. So, I don't think it's the worst thing if he's not playing as much midfield. But, that's my hot take. I think Rory Laird to average 100 over the last 9 games. So we'll work it out at the end of the season and see how he went there. But, anything else you want to add before we get to our trades?
I was going to say, even if he doesn't average 100, there should at least be uptick based on the stats. So,
I'd say 5 points minimum.
Win a few more in the back half, which will be handy. And then, we're talking potentially 8 green games, 1 red game. you'd see some uptick. So, yeah, it could be a cheeky little pot. I wouldn't imagine it'd be that highly owned.
No, he's really lowly owned at the moment. So, yeah, don't mind it. Anyways, trades for the week. What are you thinking about doing?
Trades. Well, I said before, I've got $890K to spend. I'll just pull them up, playing around with them at the moment. Going to use the DPP to put Luke Jackson in my forward line, just because there's not a lot of premium forwards. I was tossing up whether to grab Horn Francis last week, but he couldn't lift his shoulder above his head at training. And they've got the Thursday game, so I thought, geez, if he goes into last week's, the game against Sydney, hurts himself, he's going to be ruled out straight away because they play on Thursday night against Carlton this week. So just cooled my jets on Horn Francis a bit. So I'm now rolling 3 rucks. I've got English and Cameron, and then I've got Luke Jackson up forward. So just consistent scorers, rucks I seem to find. Ned Long to Zach Butters, just thinking that it's a bit of a safety upgrade. It's not... Ned Long can still put up a ton, but he can also probably average 90 for the rest of the year, whereas Zach Butters is just going to, I assume, average 100 for the rest of the year. So it's just a 10-point each week upgrade, I'm hoping. And then, yeah, tossing up whether to bring in Nick Caulfield just because it's some cash gen, and he also hasn't got the buy and could score a handy score this week and just be a handy bench player if he keeps his spot. But got that last trade with about 200K to spend. Could do a Caleb Daniel up to a primo, but there's just really not any primo forwards screaming out at me at the moment.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, as well, I don't know if yours is the same, but my forward line, I've got 6 in there. I've actually got too many. I'll have to put Bailey Smith in the midfield probably next week as well. So, yeah, that might be I'm trying to steer clear of forwards, even though, like, I brought in Jackson last week. It's like, because I only had the one ruck playing. I played him in the ruck, so similar type deal. I've got to get him back in my forward line, but that should be easy to do through some utility spots and DPPs because I've got Boyd still in the utility spot, so that shouldn't be too hard. But I'm thinking going Ashcroft, who's not playing this week, down to Manny Liddy. Looked all right.
Grabbed him last week.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be locked in the side for a while, even if he's cops a few sub there. So he could be one where instead of getting dropped, he just gets a sub because he's got really good ball use, and I think as a sub, that's like what people love to see. Like someone can come on late in the game and sort of just, when everyone's got tired legs, hit all their kicks. So
yeah,
he should be in for the rest of the year, which is just handy for a downgrade at this point of the year.
No, I think so as well. So I've got him. I'm going to downgrade to him. So that frees up, about 400K for me there. I'm going to go, I think I am going to trade out Josh Dunkley just so I can get Jordan Dawson in. But then also I'm a bit wary of just having trading, if I'm trading out a green dot this week. Like I could probably go Ned Long to him, but I kind of want to have the green dot on the field this week just in case I can claw my way back up a bit. So Josh Dunkley, I'm just not confident on his output for the remainder of the season. Geelong, you mentioned this last week, how good of a matchup Geelong are for midfielders. And I don't see him sustaining it against some of the tougher opposition who's coming up. So I feel like I'm really missing out by having Jordan Dawson. And Jordan Dawson against Richmond on the G. Loves playing. I'm not sure if his record against Richmond's that great, but his record on the G is immaculate. And it's, in recent history against Richmond for midfielders has been super easy. You saw the Dogs midfielders carve up last week. Bont found his way into form, all that sort of stuff. So I like Jordan Dawson, and I've wanted him in my side for ages. So I think I'm just going to grab him this week and do that sideways. And then I think I'm going to upgrade Clark. I know I'm going early, but his break even is in the 40s, I think, which is he might struggle to get to that depending on where he starts. And I'm going to bring Callum Mills in just for the value, I think, this week. 791K. He's going to score above that price, I think, and just kind of adds an extra player that I can have on in my defence. Does mean I've got McCarthy on the bench after next week, but I don't think that's the worst thing either, or it's just an easy kind of play to loophole to get that better scoring off if I'm worried about like a Jack Sinclair or something like that. I could do a little bit of a loop and see what, McCarthy scores as well. So, yeah, that's my trades for the week. Thoughts?
At this point of the year, it's handy to have one player in each line you can sort of just rely on. So whether that's McCarthy in back, Manny Liddy in the midfield, I'm going to roll Kyle Lohman just as a forward bench for the rest of the year. As someone who's just handy to have, like the last few rounds, we see laid outs a lot. We see a lot of team changes, not a lot of rookies playing. So if you need to make last minute downgrades, you've got a lot of flexibility with cash to move and trades. It's just, I always find it's handy to have like a consistent player, someone who's just locked into a best 22. Maybe they're not going to make heaps of cash, but yeah, McCarthy's going to be very handy for that if we get some laid out. Say Matt Roberts is laid out and you've got McCarthy's 100 or a 90 sitting on the bench, gives you a big boost on the rest of the comp.
And then I think at every line I've got a black dot as well, like a red dot that each week as well. So like if they put up a good score and they play early, you can loop them too, which is a bit of a privilege to have, I think, as well. Anyways, we might wrap it up there for another week. Thanks for the chat again. Checkers, anything coming up this week that you want to plug?
Nah, not really. Just usuals. Get to a bit of footy, hopefully.
Yeah, Thursday night in Adelaide here, so that should be good fun. I'll be at the game at some stage, I think. I've got some mates coming over from Sydney that want to catch up beforehand. So I've had this issue lately where I've just been having way too much fun at the pub, and I go to the Port game and I'm miserable. So I've just been staying at the pub to avoid that misery, really. But or we've been rocking up like halfway through the second quarter or something like that, which is good because there's no lines, no nothing. It's great. But yeah, so we'll wait and see if I get to the game or not.
You're not there for never tear us apart.
No, it doesn't bother me, mate. I'm all good. Anyways, we might wrap it up there. Thanks for listening and watching for another week, and we'll talk to you soon.